Please proceed.
Good afternoon, Chairman, committee members, and staff. I'm Ditas Katagi, and I am the Director of the California Complete Count Census 2020 Office under the Governor's Office of Planning and Research. I've served in the role for the past 2 decennial censuses, and I am the Chair of the National Advisory Committee on Race, Ethnicities, and Other Populations to the U.S. Census Bureau. Census 2020 effort is a key initiative for our state, which is why the governor invested $10 million this last fiscal year to support census efforts. $7 million went to local governments to incentivize their participation in the local update of census addresses, the LUCA program, and $3 million to begin building the infrastructure for the statewide outreach and communications effort. Adding to the governor's current budget proposal for fiscal year 18-19 of $40.3 million brings California's total investment to an unprecedented $50 million. No other state in the nation comes close to this investment or is as advanced in planning for the decennial census. This funding will be appropriated in 2018-19 and available for a 3-year effort ending in June 2021. The Census Bureau attempts to count every resident in the United States once every decade. The next enumeration is April 1st, 2020, and it will be the first time the Census Bureau will rely heavily on online responses. The primary challenge facing the Census Bureau continues to be the undercount of specific population groups. Foreign-born residents, especially undocumented, non-white residents, children under 5 years old, and renters comprise the most undercounted populations. And California has more residents in each of these categories than any other state. We will face an effort of unprecedented challenges, as you guys, I think, know about. So I wanted to just provide some brief history on statewide past efforts. In 2000, $24.7 million was spent during the critical 6-month outreach program timeframe from January to June 2000, and California outpaced the entire nation in our response rate. We received in-kind commitment and support from state agencies for legal, human resources, contracting, procurement, as well as outreach efforts to the communities that they serve. And we established a California Complete Count Committee that was extremely successful in reaching hard-to-count communities throughout using trusted messenger engagement. For the 2010 census, California appointed a 52-member Complete Count Committee and an outreach director. However, due to one of the worst recessions in recent history, only $2 million in funds were invested in the program. Much of the success of 2010 was attributed to the private investment of foundations that funded nearly $10 million of outreach and advertising from their own coffers. Census 2020 efforts will deploy similar combinations of approaches previously used to reach California's hard-to-count residents. The development of well-connected local networks of targeted community organizations and trusted messengers will be part of an effective outreach and advertising effort. By investing in research and message testing, the paid advertising effort can ensure residents understand the critical need to be counted and encourage participation. It's important to note that the decennial census is a federal operation, and California's activities will be modified based upon their operational advertising partnership and outreach efforts, which the federal government is currently being developed and have not fully disclosed. Over the last year, we have collaborated with previously engaged private foundations to discuss a statewide outreach strategy and best practices for an effective deployment. With the governor's unprecedented investment of $50 million, private foundations want to be actively involved and coordinate with us, and they are considering a match of funds. The state is preparing and planning to address new challenges for a successful 2020. I just want to say that in the last 4 weeks, we've held 7 regional convenings out of the over 25 that we will continue to do in the next 12 weeks. And we're also going to be doing tribal consultations. And we also launched our website. My team and I stand ready to partner with trusted messengers across the state to ensure a complete and accurate count of all Californians. Thank you for your time, and I'll be glad to answer any additional questions you may have.
Thank you. Finance?
Thank you. Rebecca Kirk, Department of Finance. I wanted to reiterate some of Ms. Kategi's comments that the administration definitely recognizes the critical importance of the 2020 census effort. Combined with current year resources of $10 million, the governor's budget proposal represents a request of $50.3 million for census activities, which is, as Ms. Kategi mentioned, a historic state-level investment, more than twice that of previous efforts. Furthermore, the funding, the $40.3 million in this request, or in the governor's budget, is provided fully in 2018-19 to ensure maximum flexibility throughout the 3-year effort. Also, we wanted to note that the committee staff's proposed budget bill language, which would allow the Department of Finance to augment census funding and positions if necessary during the fiscal year, would enhance the ability to be responsive to any potential need for changes moving forward. Our proposed unprecedented investment, the flexibility inherent in providing the funds up front, and committee staff's proposed provisional budget bill language provides sufficient resources and flexibility at this point in time. Regarding the recommended increase of $27 million for this effort, we would need additional time to determine whether that funding is prudent at this time and what it would need to be spent on. Thank you.
And to follow up on that, number one, obviously it's coming up in 2020. Although you mentioned it's record funding for the census, with the citizenship issue and the internet issue, a lot of folks not having access to internet, how much more information do you need to follow up on that? That's what I'm trying to figure out. With the citizenship question being a part of it, and a lot of folks not having internet, just a lot of folks in my district don't have internet, as I'm sure my colleagues don't, so I'm not sure how that connects together, or what more you would need.
Right. So we do recognize that there is uncertainty in this effort, particularly for the 2020 census, given, as you mentioned, a couple of new elements that have been thrown into the mix. We do feel, though, that giving that funding up front would allow, regardless of the proposed budget bill language, there would be another opportunity to come back if additional funding were needed based on some of these various elements, especially with the committee staff's proposed budget bill language that would give us that flexibility to do so within the fiscal year. We would have additional flexibility both to spend the money as needed in order to make sure that it's a successful effort and to augment it as necessary.
And how bad would an undercount harm us? An undercount of the census?
Pardon? Sorry.
How bad would an undercount harm the state of California?
So an undercount, I believe Ms. Kategi might have the exact number. I think it's approximately $1,900 per year for a 10-year period that would be lost for undercounted individuals in federal funding, as well as
per citizen.
Right, per undercounted individual. Yeah. And there's also the potential for implications for the number of seats that California has in the House of Representatives. So again, obviously the administration agrees that this effort is of critical importance and wants to see it be successful.
Okay. LAO?
Nothing to add.
Comments, Mr. Chu?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Let me echo what the chair said and something we all know. This may be one of the, if not the most important budget decisions that we make as far as our future budget in our state. I do very much appreciate the initial proposals by the governor's office, but we are in unprecedented times, and we have a federal government that unfortunately at this moment is not working particularly well with us here to make sure that everyone is counted with the new policies that have been proposed and the lawsuits that have ensued. So one issue that I have, and I'm sure you've heard about this, is while I appreciate the soft commitment on what the budget will look like over the next 3 years, there's been no certainty as to what community-based organization funding will look like. And from my perspective, CBO outreach is possibly the most important thing we could do. We certainly experienced in San Francisco in 2010. The only reason our census numbers had some of the most accurate counts in the state was we as a city devoted significant resources to outreach through CBOs. And my understanding is that's part of the plan, but there's not a willingness at this time to commit to that. I would like to suggest that we could make those commitments if that is what we're going to have. If the issue is whether DOF has a staffing to figure this out, obviously we need to give the department time to do that. But not having a hard commitment on what that CBO outreach is going to look like, I think is concerning many of us. And I've certainly heard already, just in the last 12 hours, concerns around the state on this topic. So, I'm wondering if you have perspective on that question.
Certainly. The governor's budget proposal does include $12.5 million built in for CBO outreach. The CBO outreach is a larger portion of this 2020 census plan than it has been in some prior years, recognizing the effectiveness and importance of having local level outreach involved in this effort.
And what I would say is, again, appreciate the $12 million. San Francisco spent, I believe, $10 million just on one city, and that's how we made sure that our undercount didn't increase. And I just did the quick math. Literally, as you were saying, that's $100,000 a district is equivalent of, 1 or 2 FTEs. I don't think that's I just don't think that's adequate, given what's at stake if we don't get this right. So I just want to put that out there as a perspective. My hope is we might be able to hold this open for a few days for further discussion, but obviously this is an incredibly important conversation.
Mr. Burrow?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There was a lot of numbers thrown around. I just want to go back to what you said. The state was 2-point-something million in 2010, and then foundations came in with 10 million. So 12-point-something was the total effort in 2010.
Yes, and then the U.S. Census Bureau had a lot of the American Recovery Act dollars, so they actually hired partnership assistants across the board.
Do you remember how much that was from the feds?
I remember on December 24th of 2009, it was like the $100 million across the country, and then they went out and hired. So I don't have it down to the state, but we're about 10% of the population.
Okay, and then you mentioned in your comments we don't know what the federal government. Do we have a date when we know what the federal government's going to do on this?
So I think the last thing I saw was that in October of this year, the Census Bureau's integrated outreach and communication partnership plan would be in full swing. They are not scheduled to hire any partnership specialists, which are the people that are in your districts, until late October of this year.
Okay, and based off the plan, it looks like 30 million of the 50 million is going to TV and nonprofits to do outreach. Is that similar to what you've done in the past?
So
is TV very effective?
It's not necessarily TV, it's a multilingual, and it's actually micro-targeted. So in the convenings that we're doing out in your communities, we're meeting with trusted messengers there to identify, there's really actual like ethnic media. I mean, in 2000, I went on a Tongan talk show. I went around, and a lot of the ethnic media outlets that aren't on, have a Nielsen rating, those are the ones that are most effective. And so part of our convenings is to understand from the community who those outlets are.
Do you have the ability to do a lot of the legwork first with tax returns and other fishing licenses and things like that? Can you get a lot of the data up front, and then you probably have an estimate of our population, then can you make a plan to just target that instead of the broad statewide approach?
Right. So the Census Bureau does a lot of the administrative record stuff. Our role here at the state, we don't do any of the counting. We're just doing outreach. And in 2000, we focused strictly on the hard to count areas, which there's, basically different parameters about what makes an area or a population hard to count, and I can go through that if you wanted me to. And so our efforts here at the state have been only really focused on the hardest to count in California, because the U.S. Census Bureau will do kind of a wide swath of advertising and outreach.
So they'll do the majority of the known
big, from
census tax filings and things like that. They can collect that data, and then it's our role as a state to do the marketing, essentially.
To Californians. I think we've learned in the past that the folks in D.C., when it comes out here, they're not as effective in actually having messages that are culturally appropriate or that resonate with Californians.
Okay. Well, thank you for the clarification. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Go ahead and open up to public comment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. Khadija Alam Javed with Advancement Project California, but here representing Census Policy Advocacy Network. We're 15 organizations statewide representing many hard-to-count communities. We're pleased to see the committee analysis acknowledging what we have been saying since day one, that it's going to cost a lot more than $40 million for proper outreach and planning for census purposes, particularly as we have shared in our analysis and letter that it's going to cost $107 million plus for community-based organizations, and that is including the governor's $12.5 million, so it's $95 million what we are asking for in addition to the $12.5. Having said that, we are very disappointed with the staff's recommendation to augment the governor's budget proposal by merely $27 million. Let me be clear, if the state doesn't allocate requested funding this year, CBOs will not be able to plan and staff census-related activities as it should. Organizations need budget certainty, and this recommendation doesn't provide for that. Infrastructures are created based on advocate funding, not the other way around. We have a lot to lose as a state, $76 billion annually to be exact. Mr. Chair and members, we are no longer talking about keeping the status quo of response rates as we have had in the past censi. We're actually worried about a lower response rate than ever before, and this is what we are hearing from already marginalized communities. In order to mitigate this problem, state must invest heavily in this year's census outreach and planning. It has to happen in this fiscal year. Thank you for your time.
Hello, my name is Yanina Casillas, and I'm with the Council on American Islamic Relations. We are also a member of CPAN, and we represent the Muslim community here in California, and there are approximately 1 million Muslims. And just to give a picture of what that would look like if we don't have enough outreach and funding. Right now, my community is very afraid of a registry. They're very afraid of the citizenship question, and they're actually doubting whether or not to participate. And we are the only organization in the state that actually provides services to the Muslim community. So it's very important to increase funding, the $95 million, and ensure that our communities feel safe and know what their rights are. Thank you.
Andrew Medina of Asian Americans Advancing Justice California, also a member of CPAN. In brevity, in support of what my colleagues have already mentioned in terms of further augmentation, particularly for CBO funding, we know that even with the census questionnaire, including a question about citizenship, but we also know that the feds are doing things like rejecting California's waiver for non-citizen enumerators, right? So we know there's going to be a lot of challenges being thrown at us for census, so we request for further augmentation.
Thank you.
Anna Hasselblad with United Ways of California, echoing the comments already made, and then quickly in addition, United Ways across California at the local level play a critical role in the census being a successful representation of all of our demographics, and the support that would be in this proposal, as well as the additional funding that's requested from stakeholders, ensures that we're capable of doing that job well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members. Martha Guerrero, representing Los Angeles County Board of Supervisors. Appreciate the recommendation by the chief budget consultant and the Department of Finance's interest to have the flexibility over the course of the year to increase funding. Los Angeles County has one of the hardest to count counties, and in Los Angeles County, with just the new citizenship question, we will have an additional 1.8 million folks that we are taking a look at having to reach out and an untested citizenship question. And in addition, there are about 1.6 million households where about half of the individuals are non-citizens. So we are really concerned that if we don't have the additional 3.3 million that we are asking, so that makes it to 12 million, that we will not be able to effectively reach out to all those additional people to count. So we are hoping for the additional funding, so 12 million for this year, and willing to work with you on what we can do to accomplish this. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Chair and members. Santosh Siram Santana, representing Chinese for Affirmative Action. We are in the heart of Chinatown, Mr. Chu's district, and he so eloquently put what we are asking for. We do appreciate the augmentation, and what we would like to see is a line item in the augmentation for community-based organizations because of the vital role they play and fulfill for trusted messengers. Given the citizenship question and the federal climate, CBOs will be crucial to securing an accurate count for California, and it should be reflected in the funding. And just one other thing, I do want to thank all of the members of the committee and staff for listening to us regarding language access and census outreach, and including the supplemental reporting language in the April 24th hearing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman and Member Michael Radigan, on behalf of the Board of Supervisors, Santa Clara County, to express our appreciation for the augmentation recommended by staff with the language, and just indicate that we're fully prepared and committed to working with the state. In fact, the Board of Supervisors in Santa Clara has committed $1 million of their own general fund in this effort, and would appreciate as much as you can pony up.
Thanks.
Christopher Gullion on behalf of the California Immigrant Policy Center. We appreciate the Assembly's augmentation for census outreach. However, we'd like to see a line item in the augmentation specifically for community-based organizations. Thank you.
Thank you.
Jeanette Saripatin on behalf of MALDEF, the Mexican American Legal Defense and Educational Fund. Also like to thank the committee for all the work that you've done around the census and for providing the augmentation. I'd like to align my comments with my colleagues as well and ask that there is a line item for community-based organizations. We think that that money is really critical to ensure that we do not have an undercount. Thank you.
Thank you.
Alejandra Duran with the Weideman Group representing NextGen California. Also appreciate the augmentation, and we'll just align our comments with CPAN.
Hi, Ingram ACLU of California, aligning my comments with CPAN as well.
Thank you. I want to thank everybody for their testimony. I'll go ahead and close public comment. We're going to hold this item open. So a little bit of housekeeping. We will not meet tomorrow. Our next meeting is on Thursday, May 24th at 1:30 in this same room. That concludes our hearing.